All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to break down an unprecedented combat sports event that literally shattered global records and just completely defied expectations. We're looking at a night that wasn't just, a standard sporting event, it was a massive cultural milestone. By pulling directly from a firsthand account, we're going to unpack exactly how a colossal UFC card ended up right on the lawn of the White House, and why the fights themselves were honestly just as shocking as the venue. And we're kicking things off with this massive claim, the greatest night of fights of all time. Now, that comes directly from Joe Rogan. This is a guy who has sat ringside calling combat sports for well over 2 decades. He's openly admitted to being a bit of a hyperbolic person, right? But it's absolutely crucial to understand that he meant this literally. In all his years of commentating, he stated there was nothing, literally nothing, even close to what happened on this specific night. To really wrap our heads around why this matters and why we're analyzing it today, just look at this staggering number. Over 150 million global viewers tuned in by the following Monday alone, and that's just the initial wave. That massive audience, it wasn't just the hardcore fans. It included millions of people experiencing the sport for the very first time. It became one of the most watched sporting events in human history. Section 1. A historic spectacle. Dodging the storm. Setting the scene for a moment here, this entire production almost didn't happen. Severe weather warnings nearly pushed the start time to 10:30 p.m., which, let's be real, would have been an absolute disaster for a 5-hour show. But mysteriously, almost like it was scripted, the storm bypassed the White House altogether, leaving the temperature sitting perfectly in the 70s. This comparison brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the night. At the actual live setting on the White House lawn, you had this intimate crowd of over 4,000 people. That included about 1,000 military personnel in the back, plus 3,000 VIPs seated right near the cage. But just a few hundred yards away at the ellipse, an insane 85,000 fans got in for free. They were watching on these massive screens with colossal sound systems. The setup was so massive, so incredibly loud, that the 4,000 people at the live cage could actually hear the roar of the 85,000 people echoing in the distance. Moving on to Section 2, from banned to mainstream. The UFC's journey. What's really fascinating about this modern spectacle is the stark contrast to the sport's incredibly controversial origins. To fully appreciate an event of this magnitude at the White House, we have to understand where this sport came from. Look at this timeline. Back in 1997, the sport was effectively banned from cable. You literally had to have DirecTV just to find it. People looked at it like it was damaging to your career to even be associated with it. I mean, it was being compared to snuff films or pornography. Then, in 2001, Zuffa purchased the organization, and they slowly began this long crawl back to legitimacy, eventually making a return to cable with UFC 37.5 on Fox Sports Net. Fast forward 25 years, and they're holding one of the world's most watched events right on the White House lawn. It's a completely unprecedented cultural shift. Section 3. A night of unprecedented knockouts. Flawless execution. Now, the massive magnitude of the location was perfectly matched by the sheer, raw intensity of the actual fights themselves. The venue was historic, for sure, but what happened inside the cage was mathematically staggering. The crucial takeaway here comes down to the number 7. 7 fights took place that night, and unbelievably, every single one of them ended in a knockout. In the entire history of the sport, there has never been a night where every single fight ended by knockout. No way. It is an entirely unprecedented feat. And because of those 7 back-to-back knockouts, it was just this flawless, high-octane showcase. It served as the absolute perfect introductory experience for the casual fans. Remember those millions of viewers among the 150 million who had never watched a UFC event before? Well, they saw the absolute peak of the sport's entertainment value, delivered flawlessly. Section 4. The ultimate underdog story. Epic main event. This incredible momentum of back-to-back knockouts brings us directly to the epic main event. The contrast in this matchup is just incredible. On one hand, you have Justin Gaethje, a 37-year-old veteran and BMF champion, stepping in for what was essentially meant to be his retirement fight. He walked in as a massive 6-1 underdog. Against him, you have Ilia Topuria. Topuria was viewed as the absolute peak of the new generation, this highly skilled prodigy and the heavy favorite. Everyone expected Topuria to simply be too much for the older veteran. But the momentum shifts in this fight, they were cinematic. Step 1, Topuria showed early dominance. It played out exactly as the odds suggested at first, with Topuria nearly finishing Gaethje in the second round. But, trying to finish a guy can cause you to gas out, and that leads to step 2, Gaethje's incredible rally. Gaethje recovered, he landed these heavy bombs in the third, and eventually dropped a brutal knee directly to Toporia's ribcage. By step 3, at the end of the fourth round, Toporia's eyes were practically swollen shut with a potential fracturing orbital. Being a smart fighter, preserving his brain and body, he retired on the stool. Gaethje, the heavy underdog, had achieved the impossible.
So, how did Gaethje survive that early onslaught to actually win? Well, it was his inhuman durability and absolute lack of quit. As Joe Rogan perfectly put it, if you're looking for quit, you go into a room, it's empty. Science might literally need to study this guy's bone density and skin. He can be hurt, he can be knocked out, but the fundamental takeaway here is that he simply will not quit.
Section 5. A call for unity, beyond the octagon. Now, taking a step back from the violent spectacle in the cage, an event at this specific location naturally drew heavy partisan reactions and political noise. But the overarching takeaway from the commentary team was entirely different. Online, the event quickly became hyper-partisan, right? The left criticizing attendees, the right claiming it as a victory for their specific brand of patriotism. But the clear, impartial message coming from the broadcast booth was a plea to push all that noise aside. Settle down, everybody. We should all be together. The core idea presented was that witnessing such an epic, unprecedented event should unite people in awe rather than fracture us along political lines. And this fascinatingly connects directly to a broader philosophical concept, ego dissolution. It's a complete, temporary loss of one's sense of self that leads to profound shifts in perspective. The source actually connects the sheer awe of this event directly to this concept, noting that a primary mission of being at the White House in the first place was to advocate for psychedelic therapies for veterans suffering from PTSD. Referencing Michael Pollan's work, the idea is that to truly change your mind, you need an experience that completely dissolves your ego and locks away your preconceived notions, even if just momentarily. So, beyond the sheer entertainment value of 85,000 people roaring outside the White House, and beyond a 37-year-old underdog doing the impossible inside the cage, we have to ask, can experiencing an unprecedented, historic spectacle together help us dissolve our collective ego and fundamentally shift our perspective? It's a really profound question about the power of shared experiences. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible material.